British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Sia Forio, and here's your news update to 1. BC Premier David Eby says the growing wildfire threatening the Fort Nelson area was held overnight and no homes burned down. Eby says a lot is going to depend on how the weather behaves in the next few days.
The situation is still very fluid and very dependent on weather over the next 24 hours, and certainly I want to reassure the people who live in the Fort Nelson area, Fort Nelson First Nation, residents of Fort Nelson, Doig River residents, that we are doing all we can to respond to fight that fire.
Fort Nelson and the Fort Nelson First Nation have been under an evacuation order since Friday due to the 84-kilometer wildfire. Evacuation orders were also issued for the Doig River First Nation and parts of the Peace River Regional District yesterday. While an evacuation order is in place for Fort Nelson, some residents like Dwayne Lowe have decided to stay behind.
We are safe, and we understand that those evacuation orders they can't force you out. So we are here to protect our property and our homes and the livestock. And the land. That's why we're staying.
Mayor Rob Fraser estimates about 50 people are staying behind in the town. Premier David Eby and Minister of State for Childcare Mitzi Dean have announced that 3 school districts in the province have been selected for a plan to use existing school spaces and resources to provide before and after childcare services. These include Chilliwack, Nanaimo Ladysmith, and the Netchaco Lake Schools. The government will provide more than $2 million in funding over the next 2 years to the districts. The BC government is taking action to prevent eviction of the people in the downtown east side. Our reporter Vivek Nakara explains how the provincial government is trying to protect the tenants.
According to the press released by BC government, they are trying to protect the people who are being exploited by the landlords. Some people use pressure tactics on tenants to leave their rental units so they can increase the rent of those units. The provincial government is trying to control rents and make it affordable for the people regardless of their income. Since 2022, the province has been working with different communities to support people experiencing homelessness in the downtown east side. Vivek Nakra, BCIT's The Crow.
Convicted killer Alan Schoenborn wants to change his name to Ken John Johnson. Schoenborn attempt to have his new name banned from publication set off a proposed law. A new bill was created to prevent people who have been convicted of serious crimes from changing their names. This includes violence against other people and acts against children, according to the Health Minister Adrian Dix. His name change certificate was provided to the family of the victims, who then posted it on social media. Admitted serial killer Jeremy Skibicki is back in court today with testimony from a DNA expert. Skibicki is pleading not guilty to first-degree murder for killing 4 Indigenous women. One of them has yet to be identified, but has been named Buffalo Woman from the Elders. His lawyers are stating that he's not criminally responsible due to mental illness. Skibicki preyed on vulnerable women at homeless shelters, with the killings being racially motivated. This, according to the Crown prosecutors. One of Canada's literary treasures has died. Dawn Kelly from the Canadian Press has the details.
Short story writer Alice Munro was 92. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2013 and was cited by the Swedish Academy as the master of the contemporary short story. Munro was the first lifelong Canadian to win the Nobel and the first recipient cited exclusively for short fiction.
Munro's most famous book is The Bear Came Over the Mountain. Now let's take a look at the weather. Today will be cloudy with breaks of sunshine with a high of 20 degrees and a low of 9. Do expect rain on Thursday and sadly on the weekend. This has been your news update to 1. I'm Sia Forio, BCIT's
Stay
The
tuned for
Crow.
more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
This is sports on 1680 The Crow.
Hello, I'm Matthias Jones with your 1:10 p.m. sports headlines. The Vancouver Canucks return to action tonight for Game 4 in Edmonton. Defenseman Noah Juleson will play his second game of the playoffs to replace Carson Soucy. Soucy was handed a one-game suspension for a cross-check to the face of Oilers captain Connor McDavid. Defenseman Nikita Zadorov shared his thoughts on the suspension after morning skate today.
Questionable decisions at the end of the day. That's how I look at it. At the end of the day, they have to protect their investment. So that's my understanding in this situation for sure.
Zadorov was fined $5,000 for his role in the end-of-game scrum that resulted in Soucy's suspension. The Oilers will also see a lineup change tonight. Reporter Gemma Karsten-Smith tells us about a change in the Oilers' crease.
It looks like the Oilers are going to swap their starting goaltender today for Game 4. It looks like they're going to go with Calvin Pickard in net. He actually played the third period of Game 3 on Sunday after Stuart Skinner was pulled after giving up 4 goals on 15 shots.
Heading into Game 4 tonight, the Canucks lead the series 2-1. In the East, the Boston Bruins will play Game 5 of their matchup against the Panthers in Florida tonight. The Panthers currently hold a 3-1 lead, and they will look to close out tonight at home. Bruins reporter Eric Russo updated fans about Captain Brad Marchand's injury status.
Brad Marchand was back on the ice to join his teammates for morning skate, but will not play in Game 5.
Jim, just what are the chances that Marchand gives it a shot tonight?
Not an option tonight.
It's a good thing he's here. We're happy to have him on the trip, and we're just going to try to get the job done for him tonight.
No lineup changes are expected for the Bruins.
Canada's World Championship team is currently playing in Austria in Prague. The puck dropped at 11:20 a.m., and Canada currently holds a 6-1 lead. Forwards Connor Bedard, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Jared McCann, and Dylan Cousins have scored goals, as well as Bowen Byram and Caden Gooley. Should the game end with a Canada win, the team will take first place in Group A with a record of 3-0. PWHL Montreal will play Game 3 of their series in Boston tonight. Montreal currently trails the series 2-0, but forward Kristen O'Neill says the pressure is on Boston.
We are down 2-0 in the series, so we kind of don't have anything to lose at this point. So I think in a different kind of way, it's a great position to be in, so we can kind of wear our heart on our sleeves and just, focus on the moment.
Over to basketball. WNBA first overall pick Caitlin Clark will make her Indiana Fever debut today. The Fever take on the Sun in Connecticut today. It is said that the arena will be sold out for a season opener for the first time since 2003. The former Iowa guard and national champion will begin her WNBA career at 4:30 p.m. today. In the NBA, the Indiana Pacers will take on the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden tonight. The Pacers evened up the series with a 32-point win last game. The series is tied at 2 ahead of tonight's game. After that, the reigning champion Denver Nuggets will host the Minnesota Timberwolves for Game 5 of their series. The Nuggets will look to take a 3-2 series lead as it is currently tied at 2. Over to soccer. Team Canada has named Jesse Marsh as their new men's team head coach. Marsh has previously coached Leeds United in England and RB Leipzig in Germany. He says it was the right time for him to take the position as head coach.
But again, I just really believe that this was the right moment in time for me, for this team, for Canada soccer, for a home World Cup. It just the convalescence of so many things, I think, along with the leadership, has meant that I'm just really excited. I'm just really excited about the potential of what we can do.
A Premier League clash between two giants today could all but decide the title race. Current title holders Manchester City face Tottenham Hotspur in London. Should City win, they will assert their place at the top and be one game away from clinching their 4th title in a row. If Tottenham win, they will move into a Champions League spot for next season. The match is currently tied 0-0 at halftime. Those are your sports headlines to 1:10 p.m. I'm Matthias Jones, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Indigenous people in Canada have had their culture systematically stripped away from them. Today, Indigenous people have found many ways to reclaim their culture and traditions. Zach Arobko introduces us to 3 First Nations people who are using art as a way to heal.
A lot of people call tattoo like pain therapy because just the focus of getting through the pain, it helps you take your mind off of life. And a lot of times they'll open up while I'm doing so. And I find it helps them a lot. I find a lot of times they'll leave feeling a lot lighter.
This is Paul McKenzie, a self-taught Wet'suwet'en tattoo artist who is currently based in Langley. McKenzie focuses on a contemporary style of tattooing, taking inspiration and learning from his culture.
A big part of me getting into tattooing was my mom sent me a textbook that the nation teaches their kids in school called The Ways of Our Ancestors. And I read this book front to back. It was really cool. It was really great to learn about our histories and our ways. It kind of forced me to jump into books I might not have found in the first place and read about a lot of great things of our culture that I had no clue about.
Tattooing is therapeutic for Paul. He has used his body as a canvas for tattoos. His legs show off his appreciation for Japanese art forms. His arms have in-progress sleeves inspired by his family and culture. Underneath Mackenzie's chin spells Laxiu clan, his family's clan. Hidden in his hair is a tattoo of a raven, an animal which represents his clan. Art has become an integral part of Mackenzie's life.
Art to me is a huge escape, especially tattooing. It involves so much focus that no matter what's going on in my life, it takes me out of my head for however long I'm doing it, and it's been very therapeutic that way. Lately, I've been tattooing a lot of Indigenous people, and connecting with them on a spiritual level has been pretty amazing. You know, like growing up disconnected from my culture, thinking I lived such a different life, being half-breed, half Caucasian as well. It's cool to connect with these people and not feel so alone, you know?
What we're trying to show here is Indigenous culture as it is in the present, you know, so it's like vibrant, it's thriving, there's new traditions emerging from old ones.
Sharon Fortney is a Wet'suwet'en woman who is the curator of Indigenous collections and engagement for the Museum of Vancouver. The museum has an exhibition called True Tribal, Contemporary Expressions of Ancestral Tattoo Practices. Indigenous tattoo artists from around the world have contributed to this exhibit to explain how tattooing has reconnected them to their culture.
In the past, museums and museum professionals were the experts on Indigenous culture. We recognize today that that's not really true, right? Like, they're one voice, but they're not privy to a lot of the knowledge that goes with the practices that they're exhibiting. So we're really just trying to be healing in the work we do with Indigenous community members and making sure that we facilitate their stories in their voice.
As an art therapist, what I do is I gather a lot of medicines that we put tobacco down for, which is cedar, gather rock, or even feathers, because these all are a connection to Mother Earth. Then we add a candle and we put in a little batch of tobacco inside this as well, sage. It all goes into a box for the youth, and the youth are able to paint these and design them themselves. And that's a beginner's package. So when the kids start learning about these boxes, they get to understand why we use the box. The box is sentimental to us.
Beverly McEwen is an elder in training as a member of the Ahousaht Nation and an art therapist based in Delta. She uses elements of First Nations culture and her passion for art to help others heal.
There's a time period where I was born and raised, our Indigenous people were removed from their community. And I was removed at a young age. So when I came to Vancouver, I already had instilled in me some art, and that was Nuu-chah-nulth art, mostly sketching and painting. But as you get older, you grow through that period and you learn about other people's way of healing, whether it's through weaving, knitting sweaters, those sorts of things that have art implemented in them.
Throughout Beverly's life, she has seen the loss of her culture traumatically affect generations of her people.
When there's healing still being done, because even at my age, when you're looking at what the government has done, the colonial system done to our people, and there's still stuff that we can identify in society that we deal with, especially around truth and reconciliation. And to be identified as First Nation, we fight against the laws that are created in the Mamachni world, which is the white people's world. We try to take back what we lost or what they took away from us. When we're still reviving and reliving what we need to gain back to help identify who we are as First Nations.
Trauma her people have suffered at the hands of residential schools, Indian day schools, boarding homes, and foster care have trickled down to create intergenerational pain. Art has created a means for healing. It has taught Beverly about herself and aided her in guiding the healing process for others.
When you do art, you're learning about how patient you can be, how much compassion is in your heart for the ones that you're teaching. And when they feel that, or they sense your energy or your motivation to share and to say, take this with you, one day you're going to share it with your kids while you're here.
A common theme between Paul, Sharon, and Beverly is they've all experienced a disconnect from their First Nations culture and used art to reclaim elements of themselves. Sharon, Beverly, and Paul have a shared desire to learn more about their cultures. In their unique ways, art is how they have helped themselves and other people begin to heal.
So when I was growing up, I didn't really know a lot about my Coast Salish heritage, and that's because my grandmother went to the Cooper Island Residential School. So a lot of what I learned in my early years was through going to museums and seeing Coast Salish belongings on display in museums, and I was just really always interested in that part of my heritage.
Just building up what I do now, it's more to do with helping the youth to understand where trauma and healing can begin.
Growing up disconnected from my nation, it always was whatever culture my mom could teach me is what I'd have, right? So she was really great at showing me that. But growing up away from it, I felt like I wanted more. I always wanted to do this work, but I was always intimidated to do so. They're my funnest things to draw because they seem to flow out of me. Art to me is a huge escape, especially tattooing.
When Paul was 3 years old, his father wanted to raise his family outside of Smithers. He grew up in Vancouver, traveling between his Wet'suwet'en mother's home and his white father's home.
It was mostly just me being moved away when I was a kid, It was never really taken away from me. I was just taken away from it. So I am planning on making a trip up there. I would like to bring my kids and show them where we're from. It's very beautiful up there. I've very recently been brought to a Wet'suwet'en urban feast, which the nation had brought in all this food down, all this traditional food, all these gifts, and invited everyone out to this hall where they had a ceremony, and the hereditary chiefs were there. And I've never been around that many people of my own nation before. It was very powerful. I remember many times that day getting chills through my body, feeling this really overwhelming sense of happiness and belonging. So since then, I've definitely been planning to go home and show my kids what home is.
On behalf of Isabella Khaleesi and Tammy Mack, my name is Zach Arabko for BCIT's The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.